I didn't know how to deal with this. I wasn't sure if I wanted to know how to deal with this. So I reached out to an anti-trafficking organization out here in Colorado, and they immediately paired me up with a therapist. I traumatized the poor woman. She's left the industry forever.
Damn.
So they paired me up, right?
Damn.
So they paired me up with a second therapist. And the second therapist, she had been already talking to other survivors of trafficking. So, she had the background. She knew what she was doing. And I told her, I said, first of all, number one, do not come at me with prescription medication right off the bat because I don't want a band aid. I want a shovel. We need to get to the root of this problem.
You are now listening to the podcast where authors inspire listeners to become authors, the Going North Podcast. I'm your host, certified self-leadership trainer, best-selling author, and book enthusiast, Dom Brightman. And you're going to be listening to a different author that will inspire you to join the business of immortality, known as authorship. Now let the fun begin. Today's episode is sponsored by both books, Going North, Tips and Techniques to Advance Yourself, and the follow-up bestseller, Stay the Course, The Elite Performer's 7 Secret Keys to Sustainable Success. Head over to Amazon.com, pick up both books. They are available in a trifecta of paperback, audio, and ebook. Cop all three of both and be on the lookout for another book from yours truly to help podcasters succeed. Now let's get on with today's episode. And today on the highlight reel builder for authors known as GMP, the Great, Glorious, and Glamorous, is the Going North Podcast. And we got another super special, awesome human for you today, courtesy of one of my favorite sites on the internet right now, known as Podmatch.com, the wonderful site where podcast guests get to connect with podcast hosts, and if they're cool, they're freaking in. And today's guest is cooler than 10 cucumbers. That's right, indeed, cooler than 10 cucumbers. And folks are like, dude, I thought the joke was cooler than 2 cucumbers. Well, nah, it's just better than 10, because today's guest, we got a freaking survivor and a warrior in the building, y'all. That's right, indeed. Let me tell you a bit about it, because today's wonderful featured bookcaster. And I say bookcaster because she not only writes books and puts pen to paper, but she also hosts a wonderful podcast of her own. She's a lovely wife, a mother, grandmother, artist, trauma recovery mentor, and a human trafficking survivor. So let's give it up for the amazing and beautiful, the one and only Amanda Blackwood. How you doing today, Amanda?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me, Tom. This is so cool.
Woo! That's right, indeed. So she acknowledges that she's cooler than 10 cucumbers. That's what I'm talking about.
I'm just going to let you sing that one. I'm not going to back it up, but I'm not going to deny it.
Don't worry, you don't have to back it up. It's okay. But you didn't deny it. So you are backing it up. You're my tag team partner on this one, buddy.
I've been accused of worse.
Hey, better a cucumber than a corn cob, am I right? Although both of those always happen here. Usually the wonderful purveyor of the corn, just giving out the corn to everybody. Whether they accept it or not, that's on them.
When you're having ribs, what would you prefer to have on your plate next to it, the cucumbers or the corn?
Yeah, definitely corns. Definitely corn. That's right, indeed. Especially if you're a cobbler too. Like that's definitely it. Yep. Cobbler eating a corn on a cob. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you thought this was a podcast interview. I was just playing. So my goodness. My goodness, as with all introductions, they're not allowed to be 20 years, 500 days long, and I probably only covered, I don't know, maybe 3 days of content. So mine, filling in the lovely folks listening of who is the amazing Amanda herself, since your first time here on Going North.
So you did such a beautiful job of introducing me that I'm kind of expand on what it was that you were talking about. I am a survivor of human trafficking. I'm very outspoken about this, but I'm not what most people think of as a human trafficking survivor. And the reason for that is because we have all these myths here in the US about what trafficking looks like or who the trafficking victims are. And I want to bust some of those myths with you if we can get there. But probably the greatest pride of my life which I know pride is a sin, but I love God. Um, Second only to that is the relationship that I have with my husband. After going through this incredible amount of trauma throughout my life, I didn't think something like that was possible. So that's one of the biggest things that I like to talk about is the power of forgiveness and moving on from the past to be able to have these healthy relationships with people afterward. And that's really who I am.
Ah, there you go, indeed. That's right, indeed. Ah, that good old forgiveness, indeed, and finding that true love. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. True love and a true protector. So it's really got your back. That's right, indeed. It's got you covered like a blanket. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. And a fellow child of the king, too. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. And you're so right. There are so many myths of human trafficking because listen to some of your past content. I'm like, God dang, what the freaking hell? It's like, wow. It's like a lot of things you wouldn't even consider, even think about. So, my goodness, so what are some of those myths? Because you're actually human trafficked, sadly, period point blank. And it was even like in your younger adult life, which is crazy because most folks wouldn't even think of that.
Right. We have this preconceived notion here in the US, believe it only happens to children when children, people under the age of 18, only make up 1/4 of all victims worldwide. That means the majority of people that are trafficked are over the age of 18, and this just blows some people's minds. They don't acknowledge it, they don't want to acknowledge it, they don't want to admit that this can happen to somebody who doesn't have complete autonomy over their bodies. We believe that when somebody becomes 18, it's like waving a magic wand over them and suddenly they're somebody else completely. They're no longer a child, as opposed to who they were the day before when they were 17 and 364 days old. It doesn't happen that way. That's not the way that the human condition exists. But one of the first things that I like to point out to people is the basic definition of human trafficking. And this is not something that I would suggest people necessarily Google or look up in Wikipedia or read about on Facebook. This is something you have to get from a reputable source. And those places get their information from other people. So the definition that I like to tell people to look for specifically is the definition from the Department of Homeland Security. You can guarantee that has a reputable source written in the laws. And that definition is human trafficking is the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain labor or sex acts from another person. So if you notice, there's a few key things that are missing. If you notice, there's no mention of any kind of age, there's no age restriction, there's no mention of money. So prostitution does not equal human trafficking and vice versa. And there's no mention of transportation. Now, in our heads, we hear the word human trafficking and we think of traffic, like cars on the road. But there's
Yep.
no mention of transportation in that definition because human smuggling is a separate issue from human trafficking. And while they do occasionally and quite often overlap, they are separate issues that need to be addressed. Very simply put, one is a crime against a human, the other is a crime against a border. So, when I talk about my story as a survivor of human trafficking, people ask me occasionally if they don't understand what the definition is, well, isn't that just abuse? No, it was absolutely trafficking. What happened to me was trafficking. I've been called a manipulator, I've been called a liar because my story doesn't look like how it is perceived in the news, in the movies, and in the media. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's sadly funny in a way that they would, like most folks would be like, oh, she's freaking lying and just really disappointing more than anything else because it's like, dude, because it's all because you're just bringing a new perspective that really isn't that new, but isn't mentioned or considered because a lot of folks like you mentioned, like, oh yeah, it's like, oh, she was trafficked as an adult. It's like, oh, traffic. There's no smuggling involved. And my goodness, like it's really just focusing on changing folks' programming with that. So
Right.
my goodness. So what was it like gaining the confidence to really come out like this and really being able to share your experiences and your story like that? Because I'm pretty sure it's probably triggered a lot of stuff and a lot of bad memories you probably prefer to forget.
It definitely did at first. It was really difficult to move beyond some of that stuff, but I found it to be a necessity. So, one of the other things about my specific story is that I was trafficked 3 different times in my life in 3 completely different circumstances in 3 different parts of the world. So, the first time was in Arizona by a boyfriend. The second time was in Florida by a pair of landlords. And the third time was by a police officer I had known for 7 years and was engaged to be married to, who lived in Scotland. The last time I was trafficked, I was 31 years old. So again, back to that no age limit here. The oldest person in Colorado in recent years to be rescued from human trafficking was in her 70s. There really is no age limit. So after going through all of that, people often believe that the story ends when you escape this kind of a situation. And that's not the case. It follows you. And that's actually why people, on average, who have been trafficked, are trafficked an average of 7 times. The fact I was only trafficked 3 times is kind of a miracle. But learning to speak up didn't happen until after repeated attacks from the man in Scotland who had taken all these different photos and videos of me being raped and molested while I was there. I was there for 152 days before I managed to get out. And he took all of these photos and videos. And in 2019, here I was 39 years old. I was 7 years out and free and on my own. I discovered that he had taken all these photos and videos and put them up on a pornography website and made me famous basically overnight. He'd also included all of my social media information and any personal information he could find on me, including old home addresses and telephone numbers, so that people
Ugh.
could find me. It destroyed me one day when I was walking through the grocery store, and a man walked up to me, told me who I was, and asked for my autograph. Now, I had lived in LA for a number of years. I was on Alias, I was on Will and Grace, I modeled for Harley Davidson. I did a lot of really cool stuff out there. So it absolutely shattered my world apart that when he recognized me, he knew exactly who I was and asked for my autograph. It was because he had seen a rape video of me. I didn't know how to deal with this. I wasn't sure if I wanted to know how to deal with this. So I reached out to an anti-trafficking organization out here in Colorado, and they immediately paired me up with a therapist. I traumatized the poor woman. She's left the industry forever.
Damn.
So they paired me up, right?
Damn.
So they paired me up with a second therapist. And the second therapist, she had been already talking to other survivors of trafficking. So, she had the background. She knew what she was doing. And I told her, I said, first of all, number one, do not come at me with prescription medication right off the bat because I don't want a band aid. I want a shovel. We need to get to the root of this problem. And number two, don't treat me like I'm some fragile porcelain doll. If I was going to break, I'd have done it already. We've got some work to do. Let's get busy. And I went in with this mindset of, I'm tired of this crap. I'm tired of this stuff happening to me. I am ready to fight back. And sometimes you have to hit that rock bottom point to learn how to have that strength to really find that shovel and to dig deep, to be able to find that strength within yourself to be able to fight back. Then I started speaking up. I said, if all these people are going to be finding me on social media and they're going to be following me, they need to know why. I started talking about how these photos and videos that were taken and that were shared were not consensual. It was not some fake rape video people were watching. This is the real deal. This is who the person is that did this to me. This is where this information comes from. 85% of pornography these days is found on the internet is created using victims of human trafficking. And there's a huge connection. And if you really want to fight human trafficking and you think that pornography is okay and it's not going to harm you, just think of all the people that it is harming, because I almost killed myself in the middle of all that. I didn't want to live. I didn't want to see the other side of this. But when I started speaking up, stuff started coming down from the internet. And I started to realize that me speaking up and telling the truth about what had happened to me and who that person was, he became more afraid of me than I ever was of him. And the more I spoke up, the stronger I got, the more strength I found within myself, the more I was willing to fight back. That is where it all kind of started from. And the more I talked about it, the easier it became. And I learned how to talk about it without doing what I call trauma vomiting, where you're basically taking all of the worst and throwing it out there on the table and letting somebody else put the puzzle pieces together to form this grotesque photo. You can talk about your experiences without traumatizing other people. And by learning how to do that, you can also learn to talk about your experiences without further traumatizing yourself.
Ah, that's what I'm talking about indeed. That's what I'm talking about indeed. 'Cause, yeah, it's like, man, like I already been through the trauma. It's like you don't want to go through it again. And I love that beautiful metaphor of like, man, I don't need a band-aid, I need a freaking shovel here, dango it. It's like, let me hit myself in the head with it, metaphorically speaking, and then come back to her for be like, all right, let's try this again. Let's dig up and find the root of this problem here.
I'm planning on very soon actually listing t-shirts for sale on my website with that phrase on it. Don't give me a band-aid, give me a shovel.
There you go. The Undertakers will be proud of that one.
Oh, okay, as long as I don't put the graphic of a grave at the bottom, I think I'll be all right.
There you go. Started from the bottom, now we here. Let me
Oh my gosh.
Oh man. That's what I'm talking about. Hashtag resilience woman, baby. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. That's how you turn the tables indeed. I'm glad you're able to do that and come out on the other side and be able to find your creativity and really embrace it too. Cause like that's really gotta suck. It's like it on one hand, it's like you had those good wonderful time in LA, or at least I'm assuming some of it was wonderful during the alias and everything else, but it's like a dude from Scotland, a cop no less, like just really tapping into the dark side of like, oh yeah, let's go ahead and blast all this trash online and just try to make this woman's life a living hell. And it's like, oh, turns out he made his own living hell with it.
Amen, man. Amen. And
Yeah.
I'm proud of being able to do that too. I mean, when you go through a lot of this stuff, I grew up with an extremely abusive household. So the first time I remember ever being molested, I was only 4. My mother was mentally and emotionally manipulative and abusive. My father was physically abusive. My brother was the one who molested me. And I was molested multiple times by other people while I was growing up, all throughout my teen years, my preteen years. It didn't seem to stop. So it took me that first 39 years of my life to learn how to stand up for myself. It took a long time to get there, but it really did take hitting that rock bottom point to be able to figure it out. I had this incredible amount of self-blame and guilt. My mother used to tell me all the time that if things kept happening to me, that I was the common denominator and I had to be the one at fault. This is such a dangerous mindset for anybody to say. I mean, there are some issues that can be explained in this way. If you're constantly picking fights with somebody, you are obviously going to have some of the root cause here. But picking fights with other people or having behavioral outbursts is a symptom most of the time. It's a symptom of other things going on, like a child that was molested at a very young age or a child that is consistently being abused. Yeah. Learning how to break away from that self blame and that guilt and that victim mentality that I had for so many years. It didn't happen overnight. It did take the therapy. It did take hard work and it took the shovel instead of the band-aid. You can't treat the symptoms. You have to get to the root cause to really dig it out and kind of throw it all on the table and make the pieces fit for yourself.
Yeah, indeed. That's right indeed. Got to complete that puzzle indeed. And if I'm not mistaken, it's like sadly being in that family being molested at 4, but if I'm not mistaken, it actually turned around because didn't a 4-year-old boy save your life, right?
Absolutely. While I was in Scotland, I had determined that I was going to end my life. And I had gotten out of the house one day. At the time, I was a smoker, so I had taken a single cigarette with me, and I walked down to this little churchyard. The church was built in the 1600s, gorgeous old building. They had a little cemetery in their yard, and I sat down in the cemetery and I was talking to a headstone that had a date of 1776 on it. And for anybody out of the US or didn't study this in school, 1776 is the year of American independence from England. Scotland is part of the United Kingdom, so England and Scotland are part of their little connection over there. I saw this as a sign. 1776, I was looking for my own independence, this time from Scotland. And this person, their name had long since been weather worn off of this very, very old, over 200-year-old headstone. And I didn't know if it was a man or a woman, but it didn't matter because that was my only friend in the world that day. And that was my best friend that day. And I talked for a long time and I kept on praying, somebody please come find me. Just come see me. Somebody's got to see me. And nobody came. So eventually I got up and I went over to the steps of the church and I tried the church doors and they were locked. It's a really old building. And I sat down on the steps and again, I sat there for a long time and I kept on saying, please, somebody just see me. And people were walking by on the street. It was the main street in this small town. People were walking by, people were driving by, and I could see people kind of glancing over at me, but they all seemed to have this same look on their face of not my circus, not my monkeys. I know we hear that all the time. We don't want to take responsibility for whatever garbage is happening in somebody else's life. And oh, that person's having a bad day, but I don't know them, so it's not my problem. That's what I was met with all day that day. I had already been through so much. I had just constant abuse every single day. I had been waterboarded. There was starvation forced on me, sleep deprivation of up to 8.5 days, I believe. I'd been through so much. I just needed somebody somewhere to care about me. And since the man that was trafficking me was a police officer, I couldn't exactly go to the police to ask for help. I didn't feel safe doing that. I had no out. And nobody came. Nobody out there cared. So eventually I made my way to the train station. And my plan was that I was going to commit suicide by train. When I left the house that day, when I had grabbed that one cigarette, I knew that it would be my last cigarette. The plan was it would be my last whenever. I got all the way to the train station and I pulled it out and I sat down to smoke. And I waited for the train. And I knew the train would be there within about a half an hour or so, just based on its schedule. I was going to smoke this cigarette and then get up and start heading down the tracks, kind of sticking close to the trees on the outside of the tracks. And once I heard the train getting closer, then I would run out in front of the train, and that would be the end of what had been my life. And while I was sitting there smoking, a man walked out onto the platform and he saw me smoking and he came over and approached and asked if he could borrow a light. And I gave him my little book of matches. And I told him, you can keep them. I won't need them anymore. And I wanted him to ask why. I wanted him to ask me, oh, are you going to quit smoking? Or, oh, why is that? Why won't you need them anymore? But instead, he took them from me, lit his cigarette, handed them back to me anyway, and said, I won't need them either. And that was it. That was the end of the conversation. He was done with me. I was not going to make this stranger care either. And about that time, that 4-year-old that you mentioned, he came out onto the platform and he reached over and he took his dad's hand while his dad smoked his cigarette. And this little boy looked at me. And when he did, he looked through me. And it was the first time in months, possibly years, that any other human saw me. He saw straight through this facade of trying to pretend like I was okay. He saw the pain in my face, in my expression. He saw something in me that nobody else could see. And I could see this worried look on his face. And when you see a little kid like that, when it's like 4 years old and they look like they're worried about something while they're staring at you, you do what you can to kind of cheer up your face. You smile at them so that you can make them smile. It worked for like a split second where he kind of smiled at me and he went straight back into that concerned face. And it took me several seconds, about 20 seconds or so, for me to recognize that I was not running toward the train, but rather back toward my prison. And in that moment, I was thanking God for a miracle that I hadn't yet seen, because I knew that if in that darkest moment, if I was going to be kept alive, there was a reason for it. And I knew life wasn't going to be what it had always been. It wasn't going to be this painful thing. Yeah. And the whole reason that that little boy saved my life is because I knew looking at him could not do to him what had been done to me so many times, starting at about that same age. I could not take away this child's innocence and leave him as scarred as I had been. And I look back on that now. That happened in 2011 when I was 31 years old. That was 12 years ago. This past June was my 12-year anniversary of freedom from human trafficking. If he was 4 then, he's probably about 16 now. And that little boy is almost a full-grown man who probably has no idea that he saved this middle-aged woman's life.
Woohoo! It's right indeed. She's still here indeed. It's right indeed. It's always good when kids can work out little miracles. They got their high intuitive gifts, especially that they're probably not even aware of yet, where it's like the grown up, they're acting kind of weird. Something's a little off. It's like,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. He was a cute little thing too. I wonder what he looks like now. I bet he's an adorable young man.
There you go. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Too bad he doesn't know your name. Be like, hey, that's freaking awesome. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. So my goodness, so congrats on the anniversary of Independence Away. So how was it like? How was the escape process like for those who may even know somebody who may be going through that, or maybe encouragement for those who may have relatives or may even still recovering from that?
It's definitely a challenge. It's a lot of people ask me, well, why didn't you just run away? And I tried. I did try. I was there the first full week before the abuse began happening when I got to Scotland. But immediately after it started, he had already taken my passport, driver's license, debit card, all that stuff away from me. And I didn't have access to my own money, my bank, my identity. I had no access to any of that. And with him being, like I said, a police officer, I didn't feel safe going to the authorities to ask for help on how to get out of here. I had given up my entire life. At the time, I think part of me was convinced that I could change his mind and make him love me, because what he was displaying was definitely not love. And I did recognize that quickly. And one night during the abuse, I remembered my old training. I had been a server and a waitress for quite a long time in my 20s. And I remembered the importance of not allowing people to see the bottom of their coffee cup in a diner. So I did the same thing with his whiskey glass that night.
Yep. There you go.
Towards the end of the night, the man was so plastered that I had to help him to get into bed. Once he finally got into bed, I told him, if I had my driver's license and my passport and my debit card, I could go down to the bank tomorrow while you're sleeping and go get all of my money out of my bank account. I've got a little over $2,000 in there, and I can give it to you and we could spend it. And he thought that was a great idea in his highly inebriated state. And he gave me back my documents. He got them out of a small little safe that was underneath the bed and gave them back to me. And I hid them so that he wouldn't remember in the morning. And the first thing I did in the morning, instead of going down to the bank, was using this to try to purchase an emergency flight home. The first flight out that I could afford, I would have to wait 5 days for. And one of
Ouch.
the most, yeah, one of the most dangerous things that we can ever tell ourselves is, I've been through worse. I'll make it through this too. We've got to stop saying this to ourselves, to our friends, to our family, our loved ones. This is not a healthy mindset. This is saying, I've been through abusive situations. I've been through bad stuff. I don't need help. I can do this on my own. In reality, I desperately needed help, and I still didn't feel comfortable asking for help from anywhere. So I kept on putting up with this abuse every single day for the next 5 days. And during that time, the abuse was so severe that I ended up with a kidney infection so bad that I was in the
Ooh,
hospital when that flight took off, and it was a non-refundable flight. And I couldn't go. I had a total of
ouch.
$11 left in my bank after that. Then I tried to take the supposed easy way out with suicide, which, by the way, that is not an easy way. It's another thing we've really got to stop saying to people. Don't take the easy way out. It's not easy making that decision. It's also an even more difficult decision when you're at that lowest point to keep living instead. So celebrate those moments. But the only way that I was able to get out after that was by putting together and piecing together a semblance of a plan. I had to get smart. Because of everything that I'd grown up experiencing, I had done secretly a lot of research into psychology and why things work the way they did. And I watched a lot of documentaries. I read a lot of books that a lot of people didn't know about. And I learned about something that we used to call Stockholm Syndrome. In recent years, we started calling it trauma bonding, but I still call it Stockholm Syndrome because I'm old. Um, and
Okay.
I learned I learned that Stockholm Syndrome is a very real phenomenon where people supposedly develop an emotional bond with their abusers, with their kidnappers, with the people who are holding them hostage and threatening their lives. And when you get down to it, that is exactly what was happening to me. I was being tortured. Sleep deprivation, food deprivation, waterboarding. My life was in his hands. I knew that if I tried to make him believe that I had developed a deep enough trauma bond to him, that I had this Stockholm syndrome, that I could convince him that I would do anything for him. So, towards the end of my 6 month visa, I was there on a fiance visa. I sat him down one day. It was in June. I had moved there in January. And I told him, you know, my visa's going to be expiring soon. And if I overstay my visa, you could get in a lot of trouble as a police officer and you might lose your job. And I could get kicked out of the UK forever and never allowed back according to UK law for violating their visa. But if you send me back now, I still have friends out there. I could stay with a friend and then I could come back in 6 months. I could come back in time for Christmas. And wouldn't that be amazing? It'd be our first Christmas together. And he got so excited at the thought, and I worked so hard to convince him that I would do anything for him over the past several months, that finally, within 2 hours, he had pulled out his credit card and paid for a round trip flight for me to leave Scotland only a few days from then and return in time for Christmas. That first year back was brutal. He came looking for me. I remember seeing him banging on the neighbor's door one day. He had my address off by one number, but I was so new to the area that the neighbors didn't know who I was and they didn't speak very good English anyway. And
Nice.
people who don't speak very good English, it's hard enough for people who do speak fluent American English to understand somebody with a Scottish accent. People who don't speak fluent English really struggle with a Scottish accent. It's nuts. So they had no idea what he was wanting. But he kept on trying to look for me and attack me, and I was looking for any excuse to get away from home and to keep myself busy. And I did so many amazing things just trying to get out of the house and get away, but also to keep myself alive. Because again, I wasn't sure I wanted to survive. After everything that I had been through, I was really struggling. And I had created a bucket list. Yeah. When you're going through actual torture, you start thinking about all the things that you didn't get a chance to do. I'm going to die, and I didn't ever get to Paris. So I went to Paris. I spent 2.5 days in Paris, a day and a half in London. I couldn't afford that. I got a new job. I was on the news. I drove up to San Francisco. I bought my first car without any help. I got an apartment with just my name on the lease. cat. Then I got a second cat because I was told cats were man repellent.
Meow.
I I went through all of these things that I had on this list of things that I had never gotten to do in my life. And as I kept on pulling one thing off the list and putting a check mark next to it, going, I did that. I finally did that. I finally did that. The list kept getting longer because every time I'd get done with one thing, two more things would go up. Eventually, I had this massive list, and there was a really big one towards the bottom that I wasn't sure I was ever going to be able to do. But my plan was to have all of this bucket list stuff done within a year after getting back. And not because I was looking for this as an excuse to stay alive, because I was looking for an excuse to walk away and again take that proverbial easy way out. And that last thing on that list was to write a book. I'd been a writer my whole life. I wanted to write a book. I'd never done that. I had blogs, I had short stories, I had poems. I wanted to write a book. I didn't get it done that year. So then I decided I was going to do it the next year. I was going to do it the next year. I just didn't get to it. So instead, I became a flight attendant. And eventually, when I did write my first book, it was all the funny stuff that happened my first year on the job as a flight attendant. My life had changed so much at that point, but one of the biggest issues had not. I still had not addressed everything that happened in the past. I was carrying around all this massive amount of trauma. Getting out of Scotland, that was the challenge. But getting out of my own head was way worse.
So I'm talking about indeed. So I'm talking about indeed. And you pulled the next question out of me because I was like, oh, yes, what led to the writing? It's like, oh, it was on the magical bucket list. That's right, indeed. The bucket of all the fun.
Right. Yeah. And that was the first one that I ever wrote, but it was not the first one that I ever published under my name. The first one that I ever published is actually the story of what happened to me the second time I was trafficked. When I wrote the book, I thought it was only the one and only time that I had ever been trafficked, because I really didn't understand the definition and what human trafficking was at the time. And it happens a lot with survivors of human trafficking. Just because we go through it doesn't mean that we have this magical understanding of what human trafficking is. We still have a lot of the same preconceived notions, even among the victims and survivors of the world. So the first book was kind of a groundbreaker for me. It kind of opened up a number of doors. That one didn't come out until January 1st of 2018. So I started going through this thing where I was publishing short books, like 65, 70-page books, twice a year for a little while. The second year kind of expanded that a little bit. I wrote a poetry book that had almost 200 pages, and it kept on getting bigger and bigger. And when I was going through all the therapy stuff in 2019, we went all the way through from summer of 2019 through November of 2020. And my therapist in November of 2020 told me, I'm not sure if there's much more that I can do to be able to help you. You've done so well, you've come so far, but I know you well enough to know that you don't end your journey here. So what are your next steps? What are you going to do next? I said, I think I'm finally ready to write my book. And she said, well, you've already written some, haven't you? I said, yes, I have. But I'm ready to write the book, the story of my life. And she said, oh, that's fantastic. I'm really happy to hear that. I think that it'd be really helpful for you. Even if you decide not to publish it, it's very therapeutic to write this stuff out sometimes. And I didn't understand what she meant by that. So I started writing the book, and she told me, she said, it's Christmas right around the corner. Let's wait until January. I reach out to you early January and check in on you, see how you're going. But if you need me, you know how to reach me. So early January rolls around, and she reaches out to me, and she says, so how's it going? I tried to say, oh, it's going great. How are you doing? She said, no, that's not what I mean. I didn't say, how are you doing? I said, how's it going? How's the book? And oh, it's done. She said, excuse me? Is this another short book? No, it is not. It is 350 pages. She said, are you kidding me? Aren't you still working 2 full-time jobs? Yes. She said, "How in the world did you manage to write 350 pages while working two full-time jobs?" I told her, I said, "When you're ready, you can't stop writing." I was staying up sometimes until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. At the time, I had a roommate who absolutely hated the sound of my keyboard. I didn't care. I was banging away at those keys at 3 or 4 in the morning, keeping him awake. Getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning, going straight back to work. It was tough, but this was the pandemic. I was working from home, and it was right there in front of me. And what else was I going to do with my time? And I wrote the entire book, and the book was released on my 10-year anniversary from Freedom from Trafficking, which was June 19th of 2021. And in July of 2021 is when I met the man that's now my husband. So my therapist was right about writing all this stuff down. When you write down all of these horrible things that have happened to you can set the book down and walk away from it, and it is no longer a physical part of your body. You have taken all of this poison and you've extracted it, put it down on paper, and you've left it in the other room. You can walk away from it. You can have a life that you've dreamed of by learning how to process all of this stuff and walk away.
Ah, that's what I'm talking about indeed. I'm talking about indeed. Heck, powerful story. Heck, even reminds me of kind of one of our past guests. He was a doctor. I think, Dr. Charles Page, no less. He actually mentioned the healing benefits of like journaling and writing things down. So it's just further proof. It's like, hey, just walking away from stuff after you just put it down and getting it out of you. So that way it can be a lot lighter, levitate, float, burst out
Yeah.
those wings, and really keep going and growing.
Yeah. You don't need that. It's you, there's a lot of things in our lives that we have told ourselves that we need. For one, if something bad has happened to us, we have to hold on to that. That's ours. That's our story. That's a part of our story and who we are. And that's not true at all. You're who you are in spite of the things that happen to you, not because of the things that happen to you. We're constantly told all of our lives that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and that's a lie too. You've already got the strength inside. You just got to dig deep and find it. Yeah. And we're also told that we should be apologized to. When you break this down, think about this logically for a moment. The people that you're looking for an apology from are the people who have injured you, oftentimes on purpose. So that man in Scotland that trafficked me, the landlords in Florida when I was 19, the boyfriend I had when I was 18 in Arizona. For a long time, I believed I was waiting for an apology from them, some kind of a public proclamation. Then I realized I was doing the same thing with my parents, with my brother, with an uncle that molested me when I was a teenager, with a stranger in a video rental store parking lot. I was waiting for apologies I was never going to receive. But why in the world was I taking my own mental health and putting it back in the hands of people who had hurt me on purpose? It is not their place to apologize to me for the things that they've done. They don't get that kind of control over how I feel about myself or my own future. I do. I do. They can kiss it.
There you go with both lips, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right. I don't know why you mentioned like putting your mental health to someone says the visual of someone just pulling out their brain and saying, "Here you go," and then they just drop it and walk off. That's basically what you're doing. It's not a good idea. Yeah, because I
I'm
left it up. Don't do
yeah, I read something on the internet probably a few days ago. It said one of the hardest things I've ever had to do was accept an apology I never received. It is hard to forgive the people who have done terrible things to us, but forgiveness isn't about a pardon. It's a huge difference in the things. I mean, if you and I were walking along and chatting and you accidentally stepped on my foot, you would say, "Oh, I'm sorry." And I would say, oh, it's not a problem. It was an accident. Of course, I'm not going to say, no, that's not okay. You need to really apologize. Telling somebody it's okay is a pardon. That is not forgiveness. That is not the same thing. Forgiveness is when you have all of this bottled up anger and visceral hatred and rage all wound up inside your body to the point where it is controlling your actions and your mood and your behaviors and your day-to-day life. That is this pent up anger that you can't seem to let go of. It's when you learn to let go of that and say, you're not controlling me anymore. That is the true meaning of forgiveness. You don't have to pardon them. You don't have to let them back into your life. You don't even have to hear the words, I'm sorry. You'll probably, in most cases, never hear those words. And it's getting worse. The more we have a distance from people, thanks to social media, we don't have to see their faces anymore. We don't feel like we need to apologize to them. It's so important to recognize, even without an apology, you can forgive somebody, you can walk away. I haven't had any kind of relationship with anybody in my family now for several years, and I'm never going to get an apology from them. They still try to attack me occasionally and still try to tell different podcast or radio hosts or TV programs that I'm not telling the truth about my life. They weren't there. They don't know. And I don't blame them for that. A lot of that is their own sense of self-preservation. My mother's angry, and I think a lot of that comes from her recognizing that she wasn't able to stop the molestation when it occurred when I was little. It's not her fault. She couldn't be everywhere at every moment of the day. My father's angry because my mother's hurt. And my brother's angry because I told the truth about what happened, even though he claims he doesn't remember anything in our childhoods. But when it comes to my brother, there's this whole different level of kind of an unusual forgiveness. He molested me when I was 4. Part of the story that a lot of people don't realize is that when this happened, my brother was 7. There's no way he should have known the things that he knew. He shouldn't have been curious yet about those things because he didn't have that physical need yet. He hadn't gone through puberty. He wasn't even close to puberty. So he learned it from somewhere. And the fact that he says that he can't remember anything in our childhoods is a huge, huge red flag warning that there was a lot of trauma happening in his life. This is how most boys deal with it. They block it out from their memories. There was something going on with him. Knowing that and looking back on that and recognizing his bedwetting behavior until he was 8, 9, 10 years old, knowing that there were all these behavioral issues, I can 100% say without a shadow of a doubt, my brother was severely traumatized and doesn't realize it. He's never dealt with it. And what happened between us when I was 4 and he was 7 was not his fault. And I have completely forgiven him.
Uh, there we go. That strength on display right there. Certainly being able to forgive him for that indeed. And you're so right indeed, because like a lot of folks wouldn't even consider that, and folks probably wouldn't even pick out that detail because, yeah, like, hey, being 7 years old doing that and not even starting puberty, not even close to it, knowing some of those activities, some of that behavior, it's like, ew, crap, what the heck happened? Like, something happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is common behavior among kids that were sexually assaulted when they're quite young. I mean, we were put on Ritalin when we were little too. Recently, I learned that Ritalin became this massive band-aid, which also goes back into what I told my therapist when I was 39 about not needing a band-aid, about needing a shovel. When we were put on Ritalin, my brother had already started acting out. And looking back, I believe it was because he had been sexually assaulted by somebody. We don't know who. I don't know who. I don't talk to the family. I don't know if they've ever figured it out or not, but I doubt it. I doubt they've ever tried to look into it. his behavioral concerns were mirroring those of what had recently in the 1980s been described as ADHD. So the doctors gave him a prescription for Ritalin for behavioral issues. My mother had me tested at the same time. They told her that I did not have it, but she didn't believe them. So she broke my brother's pills in half and gave them to me every day also. I had behavioral
Ouch.
issues. I had already been molested at that point. I was 4. So a year later, she took me off for a couple of days, and here I am, a 5-year-old child going through drug withdrawal. So she took me back in to have me tested again, of course, pinging off the walls. And the doctors said, yep, she's got it too. And they gave me my very own prescription. I stayed on it till I was 15, took myself off when I started running away from home. So going through all of this, I learned recently within the last few months that ADHD in the 1980s was very commonly misdiagnosed. And the reason for that is because the signs and symptoms of ADHD are so close to all of the signs and behavioral issues displayed in a sexually abused or physically abused child. More than 95% of ADHD diagnoses cases from the 1980s are linked to children who had been sexually abused as little kids.
Man, man, big scary world out there. And my goodness, glad you're able to get off the drugs like that because that's definitely sounds really painful. Definitely sounds really painful growing up with that. So, my goodness, my goodness. So, since you've been on so many interviews on the guest side of the microphone and heck, even doing a lot of podcast episodes of your own, you're almost up to 50 at the time of this recording, at least that's public anyway. Is there a question that you wish folks would ask you more often when you're on the guest side of the microphone?
Hmm, that is a good question. I get so many questions and they're always so good and so deep. But one of my favorite questions that I always ask of my own guests is, what is one thing that you love about yourself that's not related to your physical appearance? And the reason I ask that is because it's different with every single guest. And if I have the same guest on multiple times, their answer is different every single time. It always depends on their mood, what they've been talking about, how they feel about themselves that day. You never know what the answer is going to be. Like, that's one of my favorites.
Ah, so what is it with you?
um, at the moment, my ability to multitask. Before we started recording, I was talking about how my husband's daughter is coming to visit us. She'll be here tomorrow. I'm working on cleaning up the house so that we can get the house listed for sale. I'm managing 3 different podcasts. I have 2 different books that I'm currently working on writing. And if I wasn't a multitasker, none of this stuff would get done.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So, 2 other books, are they going to be novels? Because I believe you got 2 series out there, if I'm not mistaken, that probably need follow up, if I'm not mistaken.
I did just finish my science fiction series. So that one is completely done. It's post-apocalyptic. I tell people all the time, who better to write about the end of the world than somebody who's already lived through it. Um, I
Ta.
do have a historical fiction book series that I'm currently working on, and the Growth from Darkness Trauma Recovery Mentorship workbook series that I'm working on. So the first book in the Growth from Darkness series did come out earlier this year. It's about the stages of trauma so people can figure out where they are in their recovery journey. The second book is about the trauma reactions, what the long-term consequences are of not fighting back against them, and then how to properly fight back against them so they can retrain their brains to have a better life and healthier connections. Next year, the 2 books that I have coming out are the final 2 books in the Growth from Darkness workbook series. The first one will be about building healthy boundaries, and the second one will be about how to support survivors. So lots of irons in the fire right now. It's crazy.
That means we're going to have all the creases in our pants with all the irons in the fire. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. It's going to be great. Well, looking forward to that. So, speaking of books, if your fabulous book, Custom Justice, if that book were a food, what would it be and why?
Ooh, well, let's see. I would say, oh, and this is perfect timing on this question because I just published my first ever cookbook in June 1st. Surviving in the Kitchen came out. I would say Custom Justice would probably be my favorite recipe from that cookbook. It's called Chicken Pierre. It is a spicy stewed tomato chicken dish that's usually paired up with a rosemary garlic mashed potato and a prosciutto wrapped asparagus. And the complexity of flavors is absolutely just mind boggling. But there are those little moments where you get a little burned.
Uh, so I guess that means Blackwood is burnt wood in this case.
I like that. I like that. The food's not burned, by the way. It's just spicy.
There you go, because Amanda's the wonderful way to bring spice in the life of many other people. So indeed, whether through the words that you hear, the words that she writes down and puts to paper that you read and get in your brain. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. So, my goodness, so since you're fellow podcaster, I got to ask you the obligatory question before you make a run for it. So, what you can say are three major lessons learned from starting, running, and growing all three of your magical shoes?
Oof. One thing is make sure that you know what material you're going to be talking about, which is why I now have three of them because I couldn't decide, I guess. A big one for me is if you're going to have guests, make sure that you sign up for something like Podmatch because the pairing is so phenomenal and really supportive. Just absolutely incredible program that they've put together. And the third thing is to recognize that no matter what your podcast is, no matter what your podcast is about, if you have guests on your program, just like we're doing, we have to be able to interact back and forth. You can't allow a guest to just kind of take the microphone and talk for the next half an hour or to an hour and let them do everything. You guys have to actually converse together. If you have a guest who seems to be kind of running away with the program, pause them. It might mean a little bit of editing later on, but just remind them, hey, I'm here too. I've got questions. We need to be able to converse about this. Yeah. And make sure that they have a clear expectation.
Woohoo! That's right, indeed. That clear expectation, indeed. It's got to be clear as water. Heck, even ice. Not clear as mud. Got enough mud monsters out there. That's right, indeed.
Definitely had a few of those mud monsters, man.
They're like, bro, publicity podcasts. I'll sell my stuff, bro.
If you're a fan of Star Trek, maybe the tar monster that took down Tasha Yar.
So, there you go. All right. There we go. But hey, the name of the game is I want you to pull out in your phaser. So we're coming now to the magical question that every guest gets to receive, and that is if you'd wake up tomorrow and you were 25 again, but you're still in the current year, what advice would you give to yourself?
Get off of social media and get outdoors. There's a whole lot of life that still needs to be lived.
Woohoo! She ain't hesitate with that one. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. That's right indeed.
I've discovered in recent years that I spend way too much time on social media, and that has that has happened because of health issues and stuff, and not being able to get out and about as much as I could when I was 25. And I really miss that. I miss being able to get out there and go and explore. Yeah, as that was a big deal for me at that age. Yeah, and I know that if I was 25 years old at this point in history, I'd spend way too much time on social media, just like I'm doing right now, because it's addicting.
There you go. That's right. And your husband will be a cradle robber.
I gotta tell him that. my husband looks really young. People already think that I'm the cradle robber.
I mean, hey, it wouldn't be a bad robbing. It'll be a happy theft. I'll be like, sweet, all right.
Yeah, he's 2 years older than me, and I look about my age. And I'm often guessed a little bit younger, but he is often guessed at about a decade younger than he actually is. Lucky snot. Doesn't even
Oh,
need makeup to create the illusion.
well, you're both fabulous nonetheless. That's what I'm talking about. They both fabulous nonetheless. So my goodness. So for those who need to not only just touch grass, but also touch your books, the whole stack of them that you keep on growing and building, but they need to keep up with your journey too. So for those who need to do just that, what's the best way for folks to do so, Amanda?
They can find me through the website growthfromdarkness.com or through my Facebook page. I'm very active on Facebook. Remember what I just said about social media? Facebook.com/Amanda Blackwood Survivor. Very, very active there. And my website's going to have all of my social media links also.
Woohoo! Well, there you have it, folks. Put on some Beyonce, Destiny's Child, I'm a Survivor, and check out all Amanda's wares, y'all. Gonna put the links to all of her good stuff in the show notes. That way you can subscribe to all of her magical podcasts, keep up with the journey, and snag some copies of her magical books. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. She's got some good stuff. Some nice thick books that had their oatmeal and had their Wheaties. That's right, indeed. It'll be good for you. That's right, indeed. Get in your brain, share with others. That's right, indeed. So that way they too can be informed and inspired. Indeed, indeed. So, my goodness, any parting words before we close up shop, Amanda?
Absolutely. Always. If you're going through hard times, if you're facing abuse, if you're facing human trafficking, if you're facing any other challenges, not knowing what resources are available to you is the same thing as not having those resources. So take a moment, look it up online, find out what organizations are in your area, either to get involved with the fight against domestic violence or human trafficking, or find the organizations that you might possibly need if you're going through hard stuff and you might need some help to get out. It's important to rely on the experts. They do this for a reason. It's because they care. And it's important to rely on them because sometimes it's not safe to do it on your own. Find those people, find your community, and get the help you need. It is not a weakness. It is a strength to ask for help.
If you're hearing this part of the episode, that means you're one cool individual. Thanks a bunch for tuning in, and if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to share it with at least one other person in your network. Bonus points for 3. And be sure to check out the backlog too while you're at it, because there are hundreds of wonderful episodes to choose from as well.